Hello. Well, welcome to another installment of Writing Wednesdays. Just trying to get my lighting fixed. I had an idea that didn't work, so here we are doing it the old-fashioned way. I wasn't ready for this one. Okay. Well, it's Valentine's Day, and so let's talk about love. Love is, how do you depict love on the page? Love is attention. You pay a lot of attention to an object or something that you love. So description becomes very detailed. You can feel the sensuality in the verbs, and the sensuality comes through just in the sheer attention you spend. You describe things more and more closely. You can spend a sentence or two just describing the shape of someone's neck, or the way the hair grows in a little swirl on their back. We can talk about a little bit about the sex scene when you're writing about sex. The biggest tip I can give you is the distinction between the erotic and the pornographic. That the pornographic breaks the human being into parts. In erotic writing, you don't part out the body. You keep the body together. So people experience things, not the hand, not, the boob or whatever. It's, try not to part the body out. So happy Valentine's Day. Hope you're recovering from Mardi Gras. I thought having to do with the idea of love there were a lot of questions this week about beginnings and endings. How do I begin? How do I end? So I thought I would answer some of those questions. Here's a question about beginning. How do you get started? Say you have an idea for a story. How do you go from an idea to a novel? Do not go from an idea to a novel. Do not do it. A novel will take anywhere from 2 to 5 years to write. It's like getting married to the first person who walks down the street in Las Vegas. You drag them into the chapel and you marry them. Don't. It takes a lot of time. Go from an idea to a little story. See what's behind door number 1. Flesh it out a little bit. See if there's energy to it. I'm not much of a short story writer, but I do write them because it's a way of playing with an idea and seeing where it goes. And most, like dating, most dates don't lead to marriage. Don't just decide to have an idea and then write a novel. Work with the idea, see if it goes anywhere. Most of them don't. Maybe you get a little short out of it, 2 pages. Then try, does it have more energy? See if it goes for a longer story. You cannot go wrong this way. Then when you have you've been writing your short stories, and then one of them will have an extra energy. It's not done. It just isn't done. And then that would be, if you're attracted to it, if you really want to spend a couple of years, several years of your actual real life on this, then that's what you would pick to expand and use as your an idea for a novel. But be wary of jumping into a novel. Many millions of years are lost among writers chasing down a novel that doesn't pan out. So be very careful. Do you have the whole idea for a novel sort of plotted out and then fill in the details? Or was the plot itself an organic thing that evolved as you wrote? Generally, I I do not plan out what's going to happen in a novel. I read a book once when I was learning to write, teaching myself to write, that said, oh, you take, you have your idea, and then you make scenes on little note cards, and you put the note cards on a bulletin board, and then one by one you take them down, you write that scene, and then you write the next scene, and then. So I did that. I plotted out the novel, little index cards, and I tell you, by the time I got to the third index card, I was already bored. I don't want to plan it out in my head. I want it to move organically. I write every novel differently. It's almost like you're building the tools to write that novel as you write the novel. So you're not even using the same tools you used for the last novel. Everyone is different. So it's being very, very sensitive to your material and the texture and your own intuition, your own feelings. Am I getting what I'm looking for from that material? Am I getting there? Am I getting what I want? And it's true, writing the way I write, there's a lot of backtracking. You write something and it's a dead end. It doesn't go anywhere. So you tear it out and go back to start. So if you can plot, groovy. I can't do it, and I get bored easily. I need to have that excitement of following and sensing, and am I getting what I want out of this? Here's somebody who has a lot of different ideas, and it's hard to narrow down and start small. How do I decide what to work on first? Wherever the energy is. Go where the energy is. You feel it. This one excites me. That's what you work on. And you don't have to work chronologically. This last novel, The Revolution of Marina M., because it's historical. I mean, I know what has to happen in the history, but I don't know yet how my character is going to interact with those historical events. You go where the energy is. When I wrote White Oleander, anything I could see clearly, any scene I could see, I wrote it down and I threw it in a box. And when the box was full, I took it out and made 3-hole punch and decided what order the events were going to be in. And then I could see what I still needed to write, and I could see what didn't belong in there at all. Toss that. So every novel has its own method that you arrive at as you're writing the novel. Let's see, there's another start and stop. How do you choose where to divide a novel into chapters? That's very interesting. Usually at the end of a scene, a completed scene, a chapter will have often like 2 or 3 scenes. It could be 1 scene. And when it feels over, then that's your building block. Chapters are the building blocks. But sometimes there's a cliffhanger. Sometimes you really want that reader to come over into the next chapter. Dickens did that. And I think it's totally valid way of storytelling. You don't want to overuse it. Like everything else, variety is what the reader is looking for, is what the writer should be looking for. You don't want too many, and if only I had known, back then. You don't get too many of those. Just always vary it up. So yes, you can refer to the last chapter in the next chapter, but you don't have to. It's also like a cut in a film. You can jump over time. That's where you jump over time. You move ahead in the blank space between the chapters. Let's see. Here's a question about endings. Can you comment on endings to stories or larger works? How to wrap things up enough without being cheesy. Oh my God. Endings are very difficult. The ending to a novel or story. exceptionally difficult. You develop a sense of taste. You just have to have taste. And read enough, collect endings. I have a whole section, we had a piece about a video about the writer's notebook. And I have a whole section in my notebooks about just endings. I looked at endings and I wrote them down from different short stories, different novels, memorable endings. I also have a section, beginnings, the great beginnings. So you want to see how it's done, how different writers have done it. Not that you're going to imitate them, but you get ideas. I rewrite endings over and over and over again because they really have to. A good ending for a novel is like a big gong. You ring the big gong, boom, and the ending should reverberate all the way back through the book and really stay with the reader. An opening, an opening has to just be exceptionally beautiful and grab the reader. Short story is a sprint. You have to grab the reader right away. Interesting language, plunge them right in. With a novel, you have a little more time to feel that something large is being assembled for you. And so you can take more time. I think people make the mistake that they feel that a novel has to start like a short story, and it does not. You need to feel the bulk of the work that's coming behind it. So give your reader a chance to settle in to your world. That said, how much to close, how much to leave open, it's such a matter of taste. You don't want to tie it up in a little bow, generally speaking. But I don't like a really open-ended novel. A short story can be just a glimpse at the mystery. But a novel, you want to feel the sense that you've read something really big and it's going to be compressed and condensed and kind of folded up and packed up in a way that you can carry it. The reader can carry it with them after they're done with it. Endings. The strongest place in any sentence is the ending. The strongest place in any paragraph is the ending. The strongest place in any chapter is the ending. And the strongest place in a book is the ending. So if you find a sentence, you make your strong point, and then you sort of trail off, take that trail and fold it back into the sentence so the strongest idea is at the end of the sentence, especially at the end of a paragraph. Make sure you don't make your point and then kind of babble on for a while. Cut it, move it back. End of a chapter, punch me in the face, leave me with a feeling that something has happened to me. And then definitely the end of a novel, just take the end of Paint It Black, I went over and over and over to get just the right feeling of enough of a closure, enough of an opening. Something else opens when a novel closes. It just doesn't close down and you're done. No, you want to let it slightly open again, that your character is moving on out of frame and into the future. When to risk an ending that is left very open, it's such a matter of taste. Short stories are beautiful and ephemeral things, and you don't want to crush them with too much weight. I don't know that people are generally as good at the novel and at the short story. Usually there's one or the other, and novelists tend to be a little bit more a little heavier grip on things because they got a long way to go. So endings can be a little bit more firm in a novel than you really want them to be in a elegant contemporary short story. Do you do a lot of pre-writing research outlining or just dive right in? to writing the book. I usually go the short story route. I start with a short and then see what has energy. But that short story might be at the beginning. In White Oleander, the first 3 chapters were the initial short story, kind of expanded. In Paint It Black, it was the climax of the book was the short story, and then I work forward and backward from the center, which is where Josie comes and takes up residence at Michael's house. That was the center that was the short story. And then it's like, well, who is this girl? Who is this woman? Who was that boy? And I started moving forward, and then reshaping characters, because when you have a short story, you don't really know everything about those people. So developing it. And then how does it end? That is like just naked. You're just naked in the world, searching for something that feels true, and that really feels true and will resonate for you. The Revolution of Marina M. was a short story that is far in the future of the book, and I had to go back and find out who that character was. So I knew the timeline of the revolution, and so I was following. It was the first time I'd ever done chronological, and so that was interesting. It gives you a handhold, but on the other hand, you have a lot of territory that you're going through. Let's see. How do you write that beautiful prose of yours? Thank you. In the first draft, or do you go back through and add layers and texture? Yes, all I do is write drafts. So I kind of hammer it out in wood. In the Revolution of Marina M, it started as verse. It was a novel in verse, very light sketching, almost like an ink painting. So I get the broad outlines of things, and I go over it pretty good, get all the way to the end, and then I'll go back and flesh things out more, and details, gestures, light, the sound of people's voices, like the temperature, getting all the text, the sense material that we talked about last time, making sure that's in there. So there are many people who write finished prose. They start at the beginning, and they have to have everything clean and full and done before they move on to the next. To me, that's crawling across broken glass, but everybody finds the working method that works for them, and what works for this book doesn't necessarily work for the next book. That's the great thing about writing, is that you're always beginner. You're always creating anew. You're creating the tools anew. You're creating the whole thing anew. So you never tire of it. I'm somebody, when I get good at something, I don't care anymore. I don't need to do it anymore. And you're always a beginner in the arts. And, there's no upper limit to how good you can be or how high you could strive. So it's a lifetime occupation for me. It suits me perfectly. Let's see. Opening lines. So hard. Yeah. The opening lines will be the last thing you do. After you write your ending, you will go back to the beginning. And then you'll really have a feel of, the boundaries. You'll have more of a feeling of the themes after 4 long drafts of a book. You'll have a much better idea of what it means and what you're setting up. And then you're just singing. You're looking for the song. There's no easy way to do that. That's the art of the art. So let's see what else we have. So we have beginnings, endings, getting and staying in the zone. Oh, that's a psychological beginning. Wrestling with yourself, of course, is the hardest thing. You have a lot of Paint It Black was about artistic permission and perfectionism. And we need both. You're dancing with both. If you get too perfectionist, you can't work at all. If you don't have enough of the perfectionist, then it's flabby, it's sloppy, it's enough for government work. And what we want, thank God for government work. Let's just I'm going to retire that phrase. So when you feel that you need a little more permission, a little more punk rock, you have to be able to give yourself that. Back off being really good. And the mantra is, what is it? The old Jewish tradition, one should carry 2 pieces of paper, one in each pocket, and one says, for me the world was made, and the other one says, I am but dust. We have to dance between the 2 poles to do creative work. I read things that inspire me. Right now I'm reading a biography of Louise Nevelson, the artist, and her struggles and her artistic vision. I find that incredibly inspiring. I often turn to the artists, turn to other people working in other arts than just writing to be, it's extremely inspiring to me. Somebody said, what books should I read? I wouldn't stick with books like how to write type of books. I would look at how to be an artist kind of books. So books like this Nevelson bio, fantastic, called A Passionate Life. They're Just Kids by Patti Smith, about herself and Mapplethorpe when they were baby artists. I mean, it just fills me with energy, makes me want to go write. There's a book by a painter named Robert Henri. He was one of the Ashcan School and taught at the Art Institute of Chicago. The art spirit goes through every art, every artist, and I find that tremendously inspiring. So think more about developing yourself as an artist rather than just how am I going to get this story into some magazine. That's not as important as developing yourself as an artist and seeing how other people did that. Beginnings and endings. What are 1 or 2 things you know now that you wish you knew at any time during your writing journey? That attention to craft, that learning, that affiliation with the artistic project, and not just this story or that story. I had a friend who was an artist and was taking an art class in college, a drawing class, and she was doing her thing, and it was so beautiful, her drawing, and she was really potchking it, and it was so great. And then the teacher came along behind her, took a big old marker and drew right on top of it, and she burst into tears. And it's like, you're going to do thousands of drawings. The drawing isn't the important thing. It's you. It's developing your hand. It's developing your skill that's the important thing, not this or that piece. So if you're not getting better, if you're not challenging yourself, if not reading work that is better than you are, and learning and really looking at it as a writer looks at writing. If you go to the Magic Castle in LA, it's a club for magicians, and you know you're going to be seeing somebody really good because the back row is full of magicians. They know how it's done. They just want to see somebody really good doing it, and that's the way you need to read. You look at you read people who are really artists, and then you take apart what they've done. How long are their sentences? What is their level of diction? How do they construct that paragraph? Maybe try it yourself. Use your own words, use their structure, and write a styron paragraph, write a Didion paragraph. See what it feels like. So these are a few tips and little startings and endings and beginnings for Valentine's Day. And thank you for joining